I felt the ground tremble, not from the biting wind, but from the fury of 7 gigantic shadows. "They've come," I whispered, as total darkness swallowed what little remained of my sight. The last sacred yaks, the soul of our village, were seconds away from being torn apart. With the bone dagger heavy in my blind hand, I took the first step into the white inferno, knowing that every sound could be my last, and what I did next would decide the fate of us all. The icy air whipped Axel's wrinkled face, each gust an ice needle piercing his skin. His first step sank into the virgin snow, an almost inaudible crunch beneath the weight of decades of wisdom and grief. There was no light to guide his eyes, but the village map was etched into his soul. Every stone, every curve, every ice crevice felt with the precision of a born hunter. The mammoth bone dagger, cold and heavy, was an extension of his will, a link to the ancestors who had forged it. The ground trembled again, stronger this time, and Axel felt the deep vibration through the soles of his moccasins. It wasn't the wind, nor the groan of the frozen earth. It was the heavy tread, the colossal displacement of flesh and fur, of the bears. He imagined the 7 beasts, white mountains of hungry muscle, moving with terrifying slowness, yet unstoppable, towards the sacred yaks. The village's despair hung in the air, a bitter scent that mingled with the metallic odor of extreme cold. He knew that inside the hide dwellings, mothers clutched their children, and the eyes of the youngest, still full of innocence, turned towards the darkness outside, waiting for him. A wave of sorrow tightened his chest, a familiar ache that came with the memory of Ayana, his wife. She always said his eyes might have lost their light, but his heart saw further than anyone. Now, without her, loneliness was an icy companion, but the promise he had made her, to protect his people and their heritage, was a fire that burned within him, stronger than the cold. He took a deep breath, the air freezing in his lungs, and focused. The sound of the yaks, once a distant murmur of contentment, was now a low lament, a mix of fear and resignation. The bears were too close. Axel used the wind to his advantage, sensing the direction from which the strong, wild scent of the predators came. His sense of smell, sharpened by the darkness, was his guide. He moved with a caution that only years of hunting in extreme conditions could teach, every muscle tense, every fiber of his being on high alert. He couldn't afford a false step, an unnecessary sound. The lives of all depended on his invisibility, his ability to become a shadow in the realm of shadows. He approached the area where the yaks usually sheltered, a small valley protected by rock formations. The snow there was deeper, and Axel felt the texture beneath his feet, seeking the familiarity of the stones he had known since childhood. His mind worked at impressive speed, revisiting his grandfather's lessons, the tales of how ancient hunters dealt with impossible threats. It wasn't about brute force, but about intelligence, about knowing the enemy and the terrain better than they themselves did. Axel raised his head, feeling the vibration in the air, the low, guttural growl of one of the bears. It was so close that the animal's warm breath seemed almost to touch his skin, despite the biting cold. He knew that the confrontation was inevitable, but it wouldn't be a direct clash. It would be a dance, a battle of cunning and patience, where his vulnerability would transform into his greatest weapon. He was ready for the icy dance, for the deadly ballet that would decide the future of Axel and the entire village. The icy air whipped Axel's wrinkled face, each gust an ice needle piercing his skin. His first step sank into the virgin snow, an almost inaudible crunch beneath the weight of decades of wisdom and grief. There was no light to guide his eyes, but the village map was etched into his soul. Every stone, every curve, every ice crevice felt with the precision of a born hunter. The mammoth bone dagger, cold and heavy, was an extension of his will, a link to the ancestors who had forged it. The ground trembled again, stronger, and Axel felt the deep vibration through the soles of his moccasins. It wasn't the wind, nor the groan of the frozen earth. It was the heavy tread, the colossal displacement of flesh and fur of the bears. He imagined the 7 beasts, mountains of hungry muscle, moving with terrifying slowness, yet unstoppable, towards the sacred yaks. The village's despair hung in the air, a bitter scent that mingled with the metallic odor of extreme cold. He knew that inside the hide dwellings, mothers clutched their children, and the eyes of the youngest, full of innocence, turned towards the darkness outside, waiting for him. Sorrow tightened his chest. A familiar ache that came with the memory of Ayana, his wife. She always said his eyes might have lost their light, but his heart saw further than anyone. Now, without her, loneliness was an icy companion, but the promise he had made her to protect his people and their heritage was a fire that burned within him, stronger than the cold. He took a deep breath, the air freezing in his lungs, and focused. The sound of the yaks, once a murmur of contentment, was now a low lament, a mix of fear and resignation. The bears were too close. Axel used the wind to his advantage, sensing from where the strong, wild scent of the predators came. His sense of smell, sharpened by the darkness, was his guide. He moved with a caution that only years of hunting in extreme conditions could teach, every muscle tense, every fiber on high alert. He couldn't afford a false step or an unnecessary sound. The lives of all depended on his invisibility, on becoming a shadow in the realm of shadows. He approached the area where the yaks sheltered, a small valley protected by rock formations. The snow there was deeper, and Axel felt the texture beneath his feet. Seeking the familiarity of the stones he had known since childhood, his mind worked fast, revisiting his grandfather's lessons, the tales of how ancient hunters dealt with impossible threats. It wasn't about brute force, but about intelligence, about knowing the enemy and the terrain better than they themselves did. Axel raised his head, feeling the vibration in the air, the guttural growl of one of the bears. It was so close that the animal's warm breath seemed to touch his skin, despite the cold. He knew that the confrontation was inevitable, but it wouldn't be a direct clash. It would be a dance, a battle of cunning and patience, where his vulnerability would be his greatest weapon. He was ready for the icy dance, for the deadly ballet that would decide the future of Axel and the village. Axel moved, a shadow in the realm of shadows. His moccasins felt every snow crystal, every irregularity. The bear's deep growl, once distant, now vibrated in the air, so close that Axel felt the beast's breath. The pack leader, the largest and most cunning of the 7, was ahead, a white mountain of hungry muscle, moving with terrifying intelligence. The elder extended his hand, fumbling in the icy air. He was looking for one of the ancient traps, mammoth fiber snares, almost invisible under the snow. They weren't meant to injure, but to entangle and delay. Ayana had been his eyes. Axel felt her presence in every fiber of the snare, in every knot. An icy tear ran down his cheek, not from weakness, but from a longing that propelled him forward. He found the first snare. With precise movements, guided by memory and intuition, Axel adjusted it, making it imperceptible. The wind howled, mingling with the sounds of the yaks, now more agitated. The bears were approaching the herd, and time was an enemy as relentless as the cold. Suddenly, a dry snap, followed by a grunt of surprise and anger. A bear had fallen. Axel smiled slightly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes but spread across his face. It was the first step. The trapped beast thrashed furiously, shaking snow and ice. The other bears stopped. A tense silence hung, broken by the wind and the fury of the entangled one. Axel took advantage of the pause. He knew that polar bears, despite their strength, were creatures of habit and intelligence. They would wait, observe, try to understand the threat. It was time to act, to use the confusion. He retreated silently, moving to another strategic point where another ancestral trap awaited him. In the village, the children huddled near the fire heard the sounds. Lena, the neighbor's daughter, clutched a bone amulet, praying for the elder. She remembered Axel's stories, the hunter who saw with his heart and trusted that he would find a way. Axel felt the weight of their hopes. He wasn't just a blind man facing bears. He was the guardian of a legacy, of a wisdom that could not be extinguished. With each step, he reinforced his connection to the land, to the spirits of his ancestors. The bone dagger in his hand was a symbol of his unwavering determination. He approached the second trap, a net of branches. It was more complex, requiring a delicate touch. The scent of the bears was stronger, and he could hear the drag of their paws in the snow, their caution. They were learning, adapting. Axel knew he couldn't use the same tactic twice. He knelt, feeling the rough texture of the branches. He needed to lure them to the right spot. An ancient idea came to his mind, a distraction. He took a piece of dried meat from his pouch and threw it precisely in the opposite direction of the trap, but in the bear's path. The scent of the meat, strong and inviting, was an irresistible temptation. A sharp growl of greed echoed. Axel waited, motionless, his heart beating like a drum. He felt the tension in the air, the dance intensifying. The mammoth bone dagger pulsed, ready for the next move. He was at the center of the icy stage, the music of winter playing its most dangerous melody. Axel smelled the meat, a promise of satiety in the icy air. A sharp growl of greed echoed, followed by the drag of paws in the snow. The leader, the most cunning bear, sniffed the bait, and Axel imagined its gigantic head moving, assessing the unexpected gift. It was the chance he needed. With swift, silent movements, guided by muscle memory and urgency, Axel adjusted the net of branches, intertwining it with the snow to make it an almost invisible trap. He bent the dry branches, feeling their rough, brittle texture, and positioned them with an artisan's precision, each contributing to the strength of the whole. The silence was broken by a heavy thud and a roar of frustration. The pack leader, the white monster that seemed the personification of winter, had fallen into the second trap. The net of branches, though not meant to hold for long, entangled its front paws, making it stumble and lose its balance. The animal's fury was palpable, a tremor that resonated through the frozen ground and Axel's heart. The other bears, previously cautious, were now in an uproar, grunting and circling, confused and irritated by their leader's predicament. Axel smiled, a tired smile that didn't reach his blind eyes but spread across his wrinkled face. Two beasts, trapped. It wasn't a victory, but a reprieve. A small triumph of cunning over brute force. Ayana would have been proud. He felt her presence, a gentle warmth in his icy chest, as if she were there, whispering encouragement on the wind. The pain of loss was still a knot in his throat, but the need to protect his people was a balm, a reason to move forward. In the village, Lena, wide-eyed, heard the distant roars. She clutched the bone amulet, a gift from her grandmother, and felt a chill down her spine. Her mother hugged her, the warmth of the fire dancing on their faces. "Axel is out there, my daughter," her mother said, her voice low but firm. "He is the strength of our people." Lena closed her eyes, imagining the elder, blind but brave, facing the beasts. Hope was a flickering yet persistent flame in the heart of everyone in the village. Axel, in turn, felt the weight of that hope. He could not fail. The roars of the trapped bears were a warning, a reminder that their patience was limited. The other 5 bears, now more vigilant, began to disperse, circling the traps, trying to understand the invisible threat. They were intelligent, and Axel knew he couldn't rely on the same tactics. He needed to think ahead, use the terrain to his advantage, transform winter itself into his ally. He fumbled for the mammoth bone dagger, feeling its cold, smooth handle. It wasn't for killing, but for creating barriers, for guiding, for defending. The next step would be the riskiest. He needed to draw the bears away from the yaks, lead them away from the village, to a place where he could use the natural traps of the terrain. The wind howled, bringing with it the scent of the yaks, now calmer, but still tense. The icy dance was far from over. Axel took a deep breath, the air burning his lungs, and took the next step into the unknown. He was the shadow, the whisper in the wind, the silent guardian of a legacy that refused to die. The heavy thud and a guttural roar confirmed Axel's success. The leader of the colossal bears, a white mountain of muscle and uncontrolled fury, had fallen. The net of branches, camouflaged under the snow, had entangled its massive paws, causing it to stumble, a deafening crash echoing in the frozen air. A wave of satisfaction, fleeting but profound, washed over Axel. 2 trapped, 5 remaining. The beast roared again, a sound of pure rage that vibrated through the ground, a tremor Axel felt in his bones. The other 5 bears, startled and agitated, began to circle, their heavy steps creating a symphony of crunching snow, their low growls a chorus of irritation. Axel allowed himself a small, tired smile, a gesture that didn't reach his blind eyes, but softened the lines of his face. It was a temporary reprieve, a testament to ancestral wisdom. Ayana, his beloved, would have understood this silent triumph of mind over brute force. He felt her presence, a gentle warmth in the icy night, as if her spirit whispered encouragement on the wind. The pain of absence remained, a constant companion, but the unwavering resolve to protect his people, his sacred yaks, and his spiritual heritage fueled him, a burning ember against the darkness that threatened to swallow everything. In the yurt, Lena clutched her grandmother's bone amulet, her small hands trembling as the distant roars reached them. Her mother, Ilara, pulled her close, her embrace a shield against the invisible terrors. "Axel is out there, my daughter," Ilara murmured, her voice firm. "He is the strength of our people, the heart that beats even in the harshest winter." Lena closed her eyes, imagining the elder, not as a blind man, but as the wise hunter of legends, moving like a ghost in the snow, his spirit a beacon of hope. The fire danced on their faces, mirroring the fragile yet persistent flame of hope in every heart in the village. Axel, aware of the weight of these hopes, knew he could not fail. The roars of the trapped bears were a reminder of the scarce time. The 5 remaining, now more cautious and vigilant, began to spread out, their movements more deliberate, their senses sharpened. They were learning, adapting to the invisible threat. Axel understood that repeating tactics would be useless. He needed to innovate, to transform the very landscape of the relentless winter into his ally, guiding these colossal predators away from the vulnerable yaks and the sleeping village. His fingers tightened on the smooth, cold handle of the mammoth bone dagger. It was not an instrument of death, but of guidance, of defense, a tool to open paths and create diversions. The next phase of his plan was the riskiest. He had to lure the bears away, lead them into the treacherous depths of the frozen wilderness, where the natural terrain, hidden ravines, unstable ice formations, and snowdrifts could become his silent and powerful ally. The wind howled, a mournful song carrying the faint, comforting scent of the yaks. Now calmer, but still tense, the icy dance was far from over. Axel inhaled deeply, the icy air burning his lungs, and took another deliberate step into the vast and unknown. He was the shadow, the whisper in the storm, the unwavering guardian of an ancestral legacy that refused to yield. Axel inhaled deeply, the icy air burning his lungs, and took another deliberate step into the vast and unknown. He was the shadow, the whisper in the storm, the unwavering guardian of an ancestral legacy that refused to yield. His moccasins, soft and flexible, barely disturbed the snow, each movement a silent prayer to the spirits of the earth. The scent of the yaks, a familiar aroma of earth and fur, guided him, mingling with the acrid, wild odor of the bears, which now seemed more diffused, spread out. This alerted him. The predators were no longer together. He stopped, the mammoth bone dagger firm in his hand. The silence, once an ally, became an enemy. The wind, which had previously brought him the bear's direction, now seemed to play with the sounds, distorting them. Axel tilted his head, straining his other senses. The ground no longer vibrated with a single colossal weight, but with multiple lighter, faster ones. They had split up. The cunning of polar bears was legendary, and Axel felt a chill run down his spine, not from the cold, but from the understanding of the new threat. It was no longer a cohesive group to be led, but several fronts, each with its own danger. A pang of despair threatened to set in. How could a blind man face 5 bears, now fragmented, each seeking its own path to the yaks? The image of Ayana came to his mind, her gentle smile, her words of encouragement. "Your eyes may have lost their light, but your heart sees further," she would say. He closed his eyes, even though it made no difference, and took a deep breath, seeking the strength within himself, the resilience of his people. The pain of loss transformed into a fire, an unwavering determination. He could not yield. In the yurt, Lena, her head nestled on her mother's shoulder, felt a change in the air. The distant roars had diminished, replaced by a tense silence broken only by the howling wind. She clutched the bone amulet, her heart pounding. Ilara, sensing her daughter's unease, stroked her hair. "He is fighting, my love. Axel never gives up." But Ilara's voice carried a note of concern that Lena, even young, could perceive. The entire village felt the shift in the invisible battle. Axel, in turn, was drawing a new map in his mind. If the bears had split, he too would have to divide his attention or, more intelligently, create an even greater distraction. He needed something that could attract all of them, or at least most, away from the yaks. His fingers fumbled in the snow, searching for more than branches or snares. He needed a sound, a smell, a disturbance that would be irresistible to the hungry beasts. He remembered an ancient tactic used by hunters when confronted with wolf packs. It was risky, requiring precision and an intimate knowledge of animal behavior. Axel took a small leather pouch from his bag, containing a powder of dried herbs and seal fat, a powerful attractant for predators, but also a sign of danger. He needed to spread it in a strategic location, far from the yaks, where the wind could carry the scent, but also where the terrain offered an escape or a natural trap. Axel began to move again, not towards a specific bear, but towards the center of a vast snow plain, where the terrain was more open and dangerous for him, but also more conducive to his new strategy. Each step was an act of faith. The scent of the bears, now coming from several directions, was a constant reminder of the imminent threat. He was the focal point, the bait, the guardian. The icy dance had transformed into a ballet of shadows and risks, and Axel, the blind elder, was about to make his boldest move. He was the flame, the hope, the indomitable heart of Yakutia, and he would not bow. Axel advanced onto the vast snow plain, each step an act of faith into the icy void. The terrain, once his ally with its rocks and crevices, now opened into a treacherous expanse. Without shelter, without obvious paths, the vulnerability of his blindness was amplified under the immense dark sky. He felt the wind whip his face, bringing the biting cold and the scent of the bears, now more intense and coming from different directions, confirming their approach. The leather pouch in his hand seemed to pulse with the responsibility it carried. With fingers stiffened by the cold, Axel opened the small pouch and began to spread the powder of dried herbs and seal fat. The strong, wild aroma mingled with the air, an irresistible promise to the hungry beasts. He moved in a slow circle, creating a scent trail that spread with the wind, moving away from the yaks. Every movement was calculated, every grain of powder, a part of his desperate plan. His heart pounded, a drum in the silent vastness of the night. He was the bait, and knew the danger this represented. It didn't take long. A deep growl coming from his right was the first sign. Then another and another, echoing through the valley. The sounds were no longer of confusion, but of renewed hunger, of a powerful attraction. Axel imagined the bears' gigantic heads rising, sniffing the air, their primal instincts overcoming caution. The ground began to vibrate again, not with the previous slowness, but with increasing urgency. The heavy steps became faster, more determined. They were coming. A wave of icy fear swept over Axel, but he repelled it with the same force with which winter tried to freeze his soul. He remembered Ayana, her soft voice, the warmth of her embrace. "You are the rock of our people, Axel," she would say. "Even when darkness surrounds you, your inner light shines brighter." Her memory was a shield, a fire that propelled him. He was not alone. The spirits of his ancestors, Ayana's whispers, the hope of his village, all of it enveloped him, giving him courage. In the yurt, Lena shivered. The tense silence had been broken by a new symphony of growls and heavy footsteps, closer now, more terrifying. She clung to her mother, her small fingers clutching the bone amulet. Ilara, feeling the tension in the air, hugged her daughter tighter. Her eyes, fixed on the yurt entrance, reflected a mix of fear and unwavering faith. "Axel is fighting, my little one," she whispered. Her voice choked with emotion. "He is our hope." The other women and children, huddled near the fire, listened, their hearts beating in unison with the elder's fate. Axel felt the air stir around him. The bears were very close, the strong scent of their fur and the warmth of their heavy breath already palpable. The mammoth bone dagger in his hand was his only comfort, a reminder of his determination. He had attracted the beasts, now he needed to guide them. The open plain offered no traps, but he knew where to find them, a deep ravine, hidden by a recent blizzard, a few meters away. That was where he needed to lead them, to the abyss that could be salvation. With a final breath, Axel turned, using the bear's scent as a guide, and began to run. A risky and desperate, but necessary move. He was the bait, the guide, the guardian. The icy dance was about to reach its most dangerous point. Axel launched into a desperate run, the icy air tearing at his lungs with each inhalation, each breath an ice needle in his chest. His moccasins pounded on the compacted snow, a frantic rhythm that echoed the beat of his own heart, a drum in the silent vastness of the night. He didn't see the ravine, but he felt it, the memory of every crevice, every depression in the terrain, etched into his mind by decades of hunting and exploration, was now his only map, his invisible guide. The bear's roars grew closer, deeper, an orchestra of fury and hunger that seemed to swallow him whole. He could feel the ground vibrate beneath his feet, no longer as a distant tremor, but as the approach of an avalanche of flesh and muscle, imminent and terrifying. The predator's scent was overwhelming, mingling with his own cold sweat, a constant reminder of the death that relentlessly pursued him. He extended the mammoth bone dagger forward, not as a weapon to attack, but as an extension of his body, a probe into the treacherous void. He knew the ravine was deep, a gigantic scar on the snow-covered landscape, and a false step would mean his own end, oblivion. But the vision of Ayana, her serene and encouraging face, floated in his mind like a beacon, warding off paralyzing fear. "Axel, you are the bridge between the past and the future," she whispered in his memory, her voice a balm to his soul. He could not fail, not for himself, but for the sacred yaks, for the entire village, for the flame of their heritage that refused to die. In the yurt, Lena squeezed her eyes shut. her small hands covering her ears, trying to muffle the sounds. The roars of the chase were unmistakable now, a cacophony of animal fury, and the heavy sound of paws in the snow. So close, they seemed to come from inside the yurt itself, threatening to invade their refuge. Her mother, Ilara, hugged her with all her strength, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, but her voice still firm, a pillar of courage. "He is protecting us, my daughter. Axel is our wall, our shield against winter." The other women murmured ancient prayers, their faces pale in the flickering firelight, each feeling the weight of the invisible battle unfolding outside amidst the darkness and biting cold. Hope was a fragile yet stubborn melody that refused to be silenced by the chorus of despair. Axel felt a subtle change in the terrain. The snow beneath his feet became softer, less compacted, an undeniable sign that the edge of the ravine was dangerously close, hidden by the freshly fallen snow. He slowed his pace, probing with the dagger, each movement deliberate, every fiber of his being on high alert. The bears, on the other hand, were hot on his heels. The sound of their heavy, panting breath almost on his neck, the warmth of their breath, even in the extreme cold, seemed to touch his skin. He heard a sharp growl, followed by a faster drag of paws. One of them was getting ahead, driven by the irresistible promise of the bait's scent. With a quick, instinctive movement, an ancient hunting tactic, Axel threw a handful of snow backward towards the sound. It wasn't to hit, but to create a momentary distraction, a precious second of hesitation. The bear, caught by surprise by the impact of the snow and the unexpected interruption, grunted in confusion. It was the exact time Axel needed. He threw himself to the side with a sudden movement, his body rolling in the snow, and at the same instant felt the void chill his soul before him, the ravine. His heart leaped, but he managed to cling to the edge, his stiff fingers desperately digging into the snow and ice. The bears, blinded by hunger and reckless speed, were not so lucky. The first, the fastest, and most impetuous slipped on the treacherous edge, a roar of terror replacing that of fury as it fell into the dark abyss. A dull thud distant confirmed its fall. The others, alerted by the terrifying sound, stopped abruptly, their growls turning into grunts of confusion and caution. Axel, hanging precariously, felt the icy wind of the ravine on his face, a breath of relief and danger. He had succeeded, for now. He pulled his body up with immense effort, every muscle protesting. His fingers were numb, but determination propelled him. 4 bears remaining, and an abyss between them and the yaks. The icy dance had gained a new rhythm, a new stage. Axel was the shadow, the whisper, the guardian. He pulled his body up with immense effort, every muscle protesting in a silent scream against the cold and exhaustion. His fingers, numb and scratched, could barely grip the icy edge, but determination was a flame that refused to extinguish. He lay face down in the snow, panting, his heart beating erratically like a hurried drum. The icy air burned his lungs, but the feeling of being safe, however precariously, was a momentary relief. The roar of the bear fallen into the ravine, now more muffled but still audible, was a vivid reminder of the danger he had just avoided and the success he had achieved. The 4 remaining bears, who had stopped abruptly, now moved in hesitant circles on the opposite edge of the ravine. Their growls were of confusion and caution, no longer of blind fury. They sniffed the air, sensing the scent of their companion and Axel's strange absence. The abyss, invisible to them under the snow, was an unexpected barrier, a mystery their instincts could not fully decipher. Axel, lying in the snow, felt the slight tremors on the ground, perceiving the beast's hesitation. It was his chance. The image of Ayana appeared in his mind, no longer as a sharp pain, but as a comforting warmth. Courage is not the absence of fear, Axel, but the decision to move forward despite it, she would say. He closed his eyes, seeking strength in her words, in the memory of their love. The responsibility for his people, for the sacred yaks, was a heavy burden, but also an unwavering purpose. He could not fail, not now that the village's hope was so close to being rekindled. In the yurt, Lena, her head nestled on her mother's shoulder, felt a change in the air. The booming roars had diminished, replaced by lower grunts and a tense silence. She raised her head, her large, curious eyes fixed on the yurt entrance. Ilara, sensing the change, squeezed her daughter in her arms. A ray of hope, fragile as thin ice but persistent, began to shine in her chest. "He did it, my little one," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, but with a new tone of faith. The other women, who had been murmuring prayers, looked up, a glimpse of relief on their pale faces. Axel, with renewed effort, dragged himself to the edge of the ravine. He knew the bears wouldn't stay put for long. He needed to push them away, taking advantage of the natural barrier the ravine created. With the mammoth bone dagger, he began to scrape ice and loose snow from the edge, letting it fall into the abyss with a hissing sound. Then, he picked up a handful of loose stones and threw them forcefully, creating a dry, sharp noise that echoed in the valley. It wasn't to injure, but to scare, to create the illusion of a greater, uncontrollable danger. The bears, already cautious, reacted with a mix of irritation and fear. The strange sounds coming from the abyss, combined with the scent of their fallen companion, were too much for their primal instincts. They retreated, grunting, their heavy steps moving away from the treacherous edge. Axel continued, moving along the ravine, creating a sound and invisible barrier that drove them away from the yaks and the village. He couldn't see them, but he felt their retreat, the change in the ground's vibration. The icy dance was transforming into a silent chase, and Axel, the blind elder, was in command, guiding the predators into the depths of the wilderness, away from everything he had sworn to protect. Axel, moving with a slowness that betrayed his accumulated exhaustion, continued his journey along the edge of the ravine. Each step was an act of will, his muscles protesting, but his mind, sharp as his dagger's blade, remained focused. He scraped ice through stones, and the sound, amplified by the icy echo of the valley, seemed to push the bears further away. He felt the vibration in the ground diminish, the grunts become more distant, a sign that the predators were yielding to his invisible guidance. With each meter he advanced, a thread of hope wove into his heart, but caution was a constant companion. 4 bears were still out there, and the leader, the colossal beast that seemed the personification of winter itself, had not yet been neutralized. Axel knew the battle was far from over. In the yurt, relief was palpable, yet tenuous. Lena, who had huddled in her mother's arms, now raised her head, her curious eyes seeking the entrance. The silence, once oppressive, now brought a respite, broken only by the howling wind and the distant sounds of the retreating bears. Ilara kissed the top of her daughter's head, a faint smile appearing on her chapped lips. "He's driving them away, my little one," she said, her voice full of contained emotion. "Axel is strong." The other women in the yurt, though still pale, began to exchange hopeful glances, some even daring to whisper prayers of gratitude. The fire's flame seemed to dance with more vigor, mirroring the renewed, though fragile, hope in their hearts. Axel, however, could not afford to rest. He knew that the bears, though momentarily driven away by the ravine's barrier and the sounds, would not give up easily. Hunger was a powerful motivator. He needed a strategy that would permanently drive them away, or at least lead them to a place where they no longer posed a threat to the sacred yaks. His fingers fumbled for the dagger's handle, the cold, smooth surface a reminder of his mission. He remembered an ancient legend told by his grandfather about how YAKUT hunters, in times of desperation, used the Path of Spirits, a series of narrow, treacherous passages in the distant mountains, known for their avalanches and unstable ice formations. It was a place too dangerous for any creature, including a man. The idea was audacious, almost suicidal. How could a blind man guide colossal bears through such a treacherous path? But Axel felt a calling, a deep intuition that told him it was the only chance. He needed to lure the pack leader there, and the others would follow. He stopped, concentrating. The scent of the bears, though more distant, was still perceptible, and he could distinguish a stronger, more dominant aroma, that of the leader. It was towards him that Axel should head. With a sigh that turned into vapor in the icy air, he turned, leaving the relative safety of the ravine behind, and began to move in the opposite direction from the village, towards the distant mountains, to the path of spirits. Each step was a silent sacrifice, the exhaustion immense. But Ayana, with words of strength, was his balm. He was not just saving the yaks, he was protecting the hope and essence of the village. Blindness was a portal to deep vision. He was the guardian, the link. Axel would not bow. Axel, driven by a force that transcended exhaustion, entered the path of spirits. It was not just a place, it was a legend, a realm of ice and rock where even the bravest hesitated. For him, a blind elder, it was an act of faith. The sacred yaks, the essence of his people, were worth the risk. His moccasins sank into the uneven snow, the cold tore at his skin, but he pressed on, guided by the intense scent of the bear leader. The colossal beast left a trail of vibrations on the ground, a distant drum that grew louder, announcing the final confrontation. He imagined the bear, a mountain of muscle and white fur, following him relentlessly. In the yurt, the tense silence was heavier. Lena, nestled against Ilara, felt her mother's heart beat fast. The roars had ceased, but the absence of sound was terrifying. Ilara, eyes fixed on the entrance, prayed, clutching the amulet. Hope was a flickering flame. The other women, pale, exchanged anxious glances. Their faith in Axel was deep, but the danger was immense. Axel began to climb a steep slope, the terrain rocky and treacherous. He used the dagger to feel his way, seeking support on icy rocks and crevices. The thin air made breathing difficult, exhaustion enveloped him. But Ayana, smiling, her words of encouragement, were a balm. "You are the strength that unites our people, Axel," she whispered. He needed to be that strength. He felt the bear's presence draw near. The ground trembled, the beast's scent overwhelming, its breath warm. There was no more time. It was the moment. He found himself in a narrow passage, flanked by shimmering ice walls and jagged rocks. Ahead, he felt a void, a natural ice bridge crossing a deep abyss, covered by thin snow. It was his final trap. With a last effort, Axel launched himself onto the bridge. Quick, light steps, the dagger extended to feel the solidity of the ice. He knew the structure was fragile, made for a man, not for a colossal beast. The bear leader, driven by hunger, did not hesitate. Axel heard the beast's powerful roar, the sound of its gigantic paws on the snow, and the sharp creak of the ice under the monstrous weight. The bridge began to crack. Axel felt the vibration intensify, the ice groaning. He threw himself to the side, reaching the safety of the other bank, while the bear, in its blind fury, advanced. The beast's roar turned to terror and confusion as the ice gave way. A deafening crash echoed, followed by a dull, distant thud, making the mountain tremble. The bear leader had fallen. Axel, panting, heart-pounding, felt silence settle, heavy and absolute, broken only by the howling wind. He had succeeded. The climax had passed, and hope, stronger, began to shine. In the yurt, a muffled cry of relief escaped Ilara. The crash, though distant, had been unmistakable. The silence that followed was no longer of tension, but of a fragile peace. Lena raised her head, eyes shining. Ilara hugged her, warm tears streaming down. "He did it, my daughter. Axel did it." The other women cried with relief, their prayers of gratitude filling the yurt. The fire's flame, once trembling, danced with vigor, a reflection of victory in the icy darkness. Axel, the blind elder, had proven that true strength lies not in the eyes, but in the indomitable resilience of the human spirit. Axel, panting, felt silence settle. He had succeeded. In the yurt, Ilara hugged Lena, warm tears streaming down. He did it. My daughter. Axel did it. The distant crash had been unmistakable. The silence, once tense, was now fragile peace. The other women cried with relief and gratitude. The fire's flame danced, reflecting the victory. Axel had proven that true strength lay in the indomitable resilience of the human spirit. Still lying in the snow, his aching body protested. Axel waited. The silence was both balm and warning. The three remaining bears, previously in the ravine, now more distant, grunted in lament. The leader had fallen, and with it, the pack's cohesion. Axel felt a tremor in the ground, weaker, perceiving the bears moving away up the mountain, retreating from the invisible danger. There was no more blind hunger, only caution and fear. He had broken their spirit. With a groan, Axel dragged himself to a sitting position. The cold penetrated his bones. Exhaustion enveloped him. His arms and legs trembled. A cut on his thigh burned. But the physical pain was small compared to the relief in his heart. He had kept his promise. The sacred yaks were safe. Ayana, he thought, with a faint smile. You would be proud. The way back was dangerous, but without the pursuit. He rose slowly, using the dagger as a support. Each step was a battle against weakness, but the image of the village, of Lena and Ilara, was a beacon. He guided himself by the scent of the wind, the slope of the terrain, and the memory of stones and crevices. The path of spirits, once a deadly labyrinth, now whispered secrets of the way home. In the yurt, the weight was almost unbearable, despite the initial relief. The silence, once oppressive, was now one of anxious expectation. Ilara stood up, walking to the entrance, her eyes fixed on the darkness. Lena, sensing her mother's unease, followed her, clinging to her leg. "Will he come back, Mama?" she asked, her voice small, fragile with hope. Ilara knelt, hugging her daughter. "Yes, my little one. Axel always comes back. He is our rock." Hours dragged on. The sun peeked over the horizon, painting the sky pale, revealing the landscape. It was then that Ilara saw him. A staggering figure emerging, almost a mirage. Axel, wounded, limping, but there. A cry of joy and relief escaped her lips. "He's here! Axel is coming back!" The news spread. Women and children emerged from the yurt, their faces lit by hope, tears streaming. Lena ran ahead, her feet sinking in the snow, shouting her grandfather's name. Axel, hearing her voice, raised his head. A smile, the first in many days, illuminated his face marked by fatigue and pain. He extended his arms, and Lena threw herself into them, her embrace, the last link to life, the warmth of her hand on his blind face. As the village gathered, the rising sun bathed the scene in gold. The sacred yaks, grazing in the distance, were the silent proof of his victory. Axel, sitting by the fire, with Lena nestled in his lap and Ilara tending to his wounds, felt a profound peace. His blindness was not a burden, but a portal to clearer inner vision. He had saved his people from hunger and despair, rekindling the flame of their heritage. Ayana, he knew, was smiling. He was the guardian, the link, and his strength lay in the resilience of the indomitable spirit. Axel, with Lena nestled in his lap, felt the warmth of the campfire on his face and the even greater warmth of the hearts around him. The entire village had gathered, not in a silence of despair, but in a soft murmur of relief and gratitude. Women, children, and the few remaining elderly men approached, their eyes brimming with tears that were now of joy. Ilara, sitting beside him, tended to his wounds with gentle hands. applying herbal ointments and wrapping the bandages with a tenderness that spoke of deep love and renewed admiration. She didn't need to say anything. The touch of her hands, the scent of the herbs, and Lena's calm breathing on his chest were the sweetest and most comforting of songs. Lena, her small arms wrapped around her grandfather's neck, raised her head. Her eyes, once full of fear, now shone with a light of admiration and an understanding that went beyond her young age. "Grandpa Axel," she whispered, her voice still hoarse with emotion, "you are the bravest of all." Axel smiled, a tired but genuine smile, and stroked his granddaughter's soft hair. He felt the village's energy, the rebirth of hope that his journey had ignited. The sacred yaks, now visible in the distance, grazing peacefully under the pale dawn sun, were the living and tangible proof that life had triumphed over darkness. That day, Axel's village not only celebrated the return of their elder, but also the rebirth of their own spirit. Hunger and despair, which once seemed inescapable shadows, were driven away by the courage of a man who, though blind, saw further than anyone. The women who once murmured prayers of supplication now sang songs of praise, their voices mingling with the howling wind, carrying Axel's story to the distant mountains. Ayana, he knew, would be proud. He could almost feel the gentle breeze of her smile on his face, a silent confirmation that his sacrifice had not been in vain. In the days that followed, the village began to rebuild with renewed strength. The younger men, inspired by Axel's bravery, organized more effective patrols, using the ancestral tactics he had revived. The women, with Ilara at the forefront, worked tirelessly to replenish food stocks, their unity and altruism stronger than ever. Lena, in turn, became Axel's shadow, listening intently to his stories, learning about the stars he couldn't see and about the secrets of the snow he felt with every step. She would be the next guardian, the bridge to the future. Axel, sitting by the campfire, the warmth heating his bones, felt a deep and lasting peace. His blindness, which had once been a veil of mourning, was now a portal to an inner vision, clearer than ever. He had faced the cruelest winter, the most colossal bears, and the deepest grief, and had emerged victorious. Not only had he saved the sacred yaks, but he had rekindled the flame of his people's spiritual heritage. True strength, he understood, resided not in the sight of the eyes, but in the indomitable resilience of the human spirit, in the connection with family, in the justice done for one's people, and in the altruism that moves the soul. Axel's village, a beacon of hope in the icy vastness of Yakutia, would prosper, always remembering its elders' lesson, that even in the deepest darkness, the light of courage and love never fades. And so, winter, once a relentless enemy, became a silent witness to the unbreakable strength of the Yakutian heart. And so, winter, once a relentless enemy, became a silent witness to the unbreakable strength of the Yakutian heart. The months that followed Axel's victory unfolded at a slow but steady pace, like the gradual melting of ice in the spring that finally arrived, bringing with it a breath of renewal. The village, once plunged into the shadow of despair and hunger, flourished under the light of a new and vibrant hope. Axel, the blind elder, was not just a hero who had driven away danger. He was the living embodiment of resilience, the deep root of an ancestral tree that refused to yield to the strongest wind, inspiring every soul among his people. Sitting by the campfire, the soft crackle of wood was a familiar song that warmed not only his body, but also his soul, filling the void left by grief. Lena, now a little taller and with even more curious and attentive eyes, was always by his side, her small hand often resting on his. She did not see him as a man who had lost his sight, but as someone who perceived the world in a deeper and more mysterious way, feeling stories in the vibrations of the earth and in the icy whispers of the wind. Her small fingers traced the lines of her grandfather's wrinkled hands, absorbing the ancestral wisdom that emanated from him like a river nourishing dry land. "Grandpa Axel," she would ask in her tiny voice, "how did you know they would go to the path of spirits?" Axel would smile, a smile that illuminated his face, marked by time and harsh weather, revealing a newfound peace. "It's not knowing with your eyes, my little one, it's feeling with your heart, listening with your soul, and remembering what our ancestors taught us about respect for nature and its intricate ways." Ilara, watching them closely as she sewed furs for new winter clothes, felt her chest overflow with immense and silent gratitude. Axel's strength and courage had rekindled not only hope, but also the unwavering unity of the village. The women, inspired by his bravery and urgent need, had intensified their collective efforts, transforming scarcity into a promise of abundance through hard work and mutual cooperation. The young men, previously hesitant and disheartened, now patrolled the surroundings with new vigor and determination, applying the ancestral tactics Axel patiently shared, protecting the sacred yaks with renewed zeal and a deep awareness of their value. The animals, in turn, prospered, their thick, shiny coats under the pale, late winter sun, a living and tangible symbol of life's victory over adversity. Axel's blindness, which once seemed an insurmountable barrier and a heavy burden, had transformed into his greatest asset, a portal to heightened perception. He taught Lena to identify different types of snow by the distinct sound they made underfoot, to recognize an animal's presence by the subtle scent in the air, to feel the change in weather by the breeze on his aged skin. He guided her through the constellations he could not see, but knew by heart and soul, telling the legends that linked his people to the starry sky and ancestral spirits. Lena, with her eager mind and open spirit, absorbed every word, every gesture, every lesson, a promising future in her eyes. She was the living bridge between past and future, the guardian of the flame Axel had rekindled, destined to keep it burning. Axel's village was no longer just an isolated settlement in the icy vastness of Yakutia. It was a sanctuary of resilience, a vibrant testament to the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. The story of Axel, of the blind elder who faced colossal beasts and saved his people from annihilation, became a legend whispered around campfires, passed down with reverence from generation to generation. It was a story that spoke of overcoming adversity, of selfless altruism, of the deep connection with family, with community, and with the ancestral land. Axel, with Lena asleep in his lap, felt the constant pulse of life around him, a melody of hope. He had fulfilled his purpose, and the pain of Ayana's loss, though still present, was now a gentle ache, intertwined with the joy of seeing his people flourish again. He had proven that true strength resided not in physical sight, but in the unwavering clarity of spirit, in the courage to face the impossible, and in the unshakable faith in the power of human connection. Winter, in its cruelty, had forged a stronger, more united people, and Axel, the guardian, knew that his legacy would live forever in the hearts of his people, a beacon of hope in the deepest darkness.